Hello and welcome to the Story Engine podcast. My name is Kyle Gray, and today on the show we have Chris Miles. Chris is the founder of Money Ripples and is a master at creating new and unsuspecting ways to create passive income, especially for entrepreneurs and people who have been working really hard and doing everything that they're supposed to be doing to save. We're going to learn some of the limitations of the ways that we're all supposed to be doing and saving in order to retire, and ways to create passive income that might make your work optional faster than you expected. So without any further ado, let's hand it over to Chris Miles. Chris Miles, welcome to the Story Engine podcast.
Hey, pleasure to be here, Kyle.
I'm excited to have you on the show today. You talk about something controversial, something everybody has a slightly different definition and vision for: passive income. But before we dive into that, I would love to hear a little bit about who you are and how you're showing up in the world today.
Yeah, who I am, Chris Miles. I'm known often as like the anti-financial advisor, but I'm also a father of 8, a blended family. My wife had 2, I had 6 from a previous marriage. So we kind of created this Brady Bunch where we can't keep Alice in the house because there's no room for her, but I'm a guy that's pretty private in a lot of ways. Like I'm actually like an introverted kid that became overly extroverted in college, and then found my happy medium where I'm more of an ambivert. So I'm the kind of guy that usually doesn't like to be the center of attention at all, even though I tend to find myself on that main stage often with my podcast and with all the things that I do. But for the most part, I'm the type of person that's just, I have my routine. I'm pretty structured. I'm a Virgo, so that tells you a little bit there. But I'm one of those guys that just like, I run marathons. Used to be one of the nation's top amateur ballroom dancers almost 25 years ago. And now I teach a lot of people about how to become financially free like I had to.
Everybody has a slightly different answer for this question. It's always fun to see where people go. I like that you called yourself an anti-financial advisor. I've done a lot of work with financial advisors in the past, and I think they definitely have their place and they have their things, but I appreciate all of the different colors in life. It seems like you do exemplify a life of being able to live without having to work. Tell us a little bit about being an anti-financial advisor, or what that means and how that adds up for the people you work with.
Yeah, what it means is I basically tell people to not listen to financial advisors in many cases, right? Not that they're bad people. In fact, they're very good-hearted people, but I'm really telling people to not listen to me about 25 years ago, because I was going to college. I planned to become a business consultant. I wanted to be like the Bobs from Office Space, right? The guys that go in and try to fix the business and walk out with a big paycheck. But I realized, being in college, I didn't want to be the guy that got his MBA and then thought I knew something about business. I wanted real life experience. So I dropped out of college because it was supposed to be a 1-year sabbatical, and I tried to find some business to start. And the first one that came up that was intriguing to me was being a financial advisor, because I thought, worst case, I learned about money and I learned about business. So I went down that path, and I loved being an entrepreneur so much, I never finished my degree. I had one paper to write. It wasn't even really a class. It was one paper to write to get my degree, and I didn't do it. I just said, screw that. Like, I was a sociology major with a triple minor in psychology, Japanese, and ballroom dancing. And really for me, it's like, why? Because I can make so much more money and have to control my time, my freedom, and everything as an entrepreneur. So I stayed on that path, and I was a financial advisor for 4 years. And about that time I hit my 4th year, my dad reached out to me. He says, well, Chris, when are you going to become my advisor? Now, well, one, I didn't think he would ever ask me because, he changed my diapers, right? So it's kind of a weird thing going in to talk to somebody who's, at that time, more than twice my age. He was 61 at the time. I was 28. And he said, Chris, listen, I got to retire. Like I'm hating life right now. The stress of this job is literally killing me. Because by this point, he'd already had strokes and heart attacks by his 40s and 50s. So he was ready to be out. And understand that my dad was like the penny pinching, cheap saver. We all said cheap, but he would say he's frugal, right? But he's like, no, you're cheap. Yeah. Like, you're the guy that bought everything on sale, case lot sale. He was post-depression era when he was born, right? So he was kind of like just before the forefront of the baby boomers. And so for him, like, the guy that's like this penny pinching saver is asking me for help. I was kind of humbled by it. But as I sat down with him, I flew back to Oregon to go see him. And then as I sat down with him, I looked at all of his numbers, everything. The guy had paid off all of his debt, including his house. So he's 100% debt free. The guy had been stuffing money in his 401k retirement plan, getting the match and everything, just like every good boy should, right? That's the little checkbox you're supposed to do, and everything that I was teaching too. And then I look at all his numbers. I said, Dad, here's the deal. If you try to retire today, being 61 years old, you would need to die in about 5 or 6 years because you'll run out of money.
Hmm.
Says, all right, that's not what I wanted to hear from you. What do I need to do? I said, I don't know, work longer, save more, and I understand that this guy was like doing everything right from what I taught as a financial advisor, and I mean, come on, Dave Ramsey teaches the same kind of crap as well. And and he's proof that it doesn't work. And that rocked my world because again, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I believed that this had to be the way. And yet it wasn't working. And about a month later, I'm talking with a friend of mine and I trained him to be a financial advisor, this friend. But then he quit just months prior to go do real estate investing. And as I'm talking with him, I thought maybe he's broke now. He want to come back to work for me again. That was what I was hoping to hear from him. But instead, I hear the opposite. I hear, Chris, my life is awesome. My dad and I have partnered on some real estate deals, and we've doubled his income as a professor at the local university. I said, wait, hold on. You've been doing this like what, 4 or 5 months, and you've already doubled your dad's income? And I knew his dad's financial situation because I went to tell him to invest with me. And then all of a sudden, last minute, he kind of did a beeline and says, I'm going to do this real estate stuff instead. So I was a little bit pissed off. But here it is, like, ta-da, like his dad's in a way better position than even my own dad. Heck, he's in a better position than I'm in. And that's what came out of the conversation is my friend asked me, he's like, well, Chris, how many of your clients are actually financially free where they don't worry about money? I said, well, none. They all worry about money. Even the ones who are retired still worry about running out of money. Okay, how about this, Chris? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing the investments you've been recommending? And I knew there was guys in my office that were working there since the 1970s. I said, well, none. I guess none of them are. He's like, there's your problem. And over the ensuing months, I basically took the Matrix red pill, right? And I started to realize that this whole other world, like even the real estate world, it wasn't just buying rentals. There's other things you could do with your money that can actually generate income now and generate a lot more income than you would in the stock market with, better assets backing it up. And eventually I was left with a choice. Either I stay the path and I keep teaching people what the same old save and slave away, or I, admit that I was wrong and I quit. And I chose the latter. I said, you know what? March of 2006, I said, no more am I going to teach about money again. I'll just be a mortgage broker and I'll teach ballroom dancing on the side. And I was doing that while also learning about what these guys did in the real estate game. And then later that same year, as I started to take my money away from the stock market and start putting it more into real estate type of things, I was actually at a point where I was able to retire, 28, almost 29 years old, and I had enough passive income coming in. I didn't have to keep working anymore, or as I call it, work optional. And that blew my mind because I went from hoping and praying I could save millions of dollars to then live off the interest from the stock market by the time I was in my 40s. And yet here I am with a lot less money doing it in real estate in my 20s. And I was just I was just mind blown by this. And of course, people wanted to ask me like, wait, because the people close to me were like, wait a minute, you're able to retire? Oh. And so eventually 2007, I came out of retirement, taught people how I did what I did, and even went broke during the recession, as the years went on and had to dig myself out of $1 million plus debt hole. And so the cool thing is not only was I able to retire the first time in 2006, but then after going through, almost complete failure, almost bankruptcy, by the end of 2016, I was able to once again do it the second time when I was 39 years old. So what's interesting is in my own laboratory of life, I had to prove what I was teaching with this passive income and everything twice. Not to mention now I've had many other clients do the same thing over the years.
Amazing. I love that it's a reliable, repeatable process
Mm-hmm.
and something that, it's not just getting lucky. It's not at the right time. And I think it's fascinating that so many financial planners haven't been able to create the freedom for themselves that they're working with others to create. And that's a very interesting dichotomy.
Yeah. It's interesting because even though I don't like to go to financial advisor trainings, I still have some licenses that I've held. And so I'll run into them. And I'm in part of this group that's like the top 1% in that particular company, top 1% of producers in the financial world. And I've had them come up to me after I've told them like what I do. I've had some come up to me privately saying, man, I would love to learn how to do that. You got to, you have to admit, like, there's got to be something wrong when these guys, and a lot of these guys are like their 50s or 60s, have made millions of dollars in their career, but yet they're like, yeah, but haven't saved enough to really have a comfortable retirement. And yet you've been able to do this for, twice, for the last few decades.
Mm-hmm. And is it all real estate? Is that the primary method that you use and you work with, or are there any other channels that you create with people?
Yeah, I mean, usually the more certain way to go is going with real estate. Not that it's risk free. I mean, there's always risk in anything you do, right? But things that are backed by real estate. So it doesn't have to be, like I said, it's not like the typical buy a rental in your backyard. That's what most people think when they think of real estate. I learned that there was this whole other world that was way beyond that. Granted, rentals can be good and they can definitely build long term wealth. But for example, one thing that I learned in 2006 when I was starting to be open to this is like my friend, for example, he would do fix and flips. So he would buy a property for cheap. And actually, a lot of times he wouldn't even fix them up. He would just buy them for cheap and then sell them at retail price, right? He was more flipping properties. And he would make, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on some properties. And what he would do, he would say, hey, listen, like I have so much opportunity that I don't even have enough money to buy all the deals I want. And so he's like, but if you lend me money, if basically you become my bank, I'll pay you interest every month. And now at the time I was a lot richer, but even today, I mean, even I do this to this day where I don't do any of the real estate actual active investing. I'm investing with the active investors, the ones that are doing the work. I'm literally hands off where it actually is more of a true passive income, not like the fake passive you hear out there in the marketing language today.
Hmm.
But where I can literally lend my money, get paid 1% a month. So if I have $100,000, I'm getting paid $1,000 a month. Vice versa, well, not vice versa, but even extend that more. If I have $1 million, I'm getting paid $10,000 a month on that money. And that's different than the retirement model that I call it the accumulation theory of financial advisors, which is if you happen to be in your 60s, you're only supposed to pull out 3% a year. So if you have $1 million, you're only supposed to pull out $30,000 a year. So you don't run out of money when there's markets ups and downs, right? You can let your money last for decades. It used to be 4%, but that got debunked a long time ago. That's only if you're in your 70s now because people are living longer. 2% if you try to retire early. So that whole FIRE movement, that financially independent retire early movement you hear from people in their 30s and stuff that just try to save in the stock market. They keep talking about the 4% rule. I went on the Facebook group page, told them, hey, listen, it's a 2% rule for you guys your age. Like there's models that have proven that. And I got booted out of the group. Ironic that I'm the one guy that actually was FIRE twice, according to them. And yet they didn't want to listen to what I had to say because they're like, no, that destroys our whole purpose of this thing. So all these people that want to be free are, of course, listening to each other that want to be free, right? They're all wannabes. And so, no, it's like, no, you have to live on 20,000 a year if you've got $1 million. But again, when I was like, wait, I could have 10,000 a month or 120,000 a year versus 30,000 a year, that's way better. And that's the difference, right? It's like it's an income focus, it's acceleration versus accumulation, and that's why a lot of our clients are shocked because they think I've got decades to go before I can retire, quote unquote. And most of them don't want to fully retire; they still want to do something. They just want to have life on their own terms. What they don't realize is like, wait, I can lend my money to real estate investors, get paid on that money, and if they don't pay me, like the bank, I can take that property from them and get all my money back, and then probably make some more. There's other things you could do too, like oil and gas. Like I'll do oil and gas, but again, you'll own the rights to land and everything. So then at least you have that ownership or that real estate to back you up. I have a partnership right now where we buy and sell raw land. Again, I'm hands off. I just finance it, but I'm a 70% partner, and over $500,000 is now generating over $12,000 a month. From just that business venture that we have. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. There's self storage, there's apartment buildings. I mean, there's even like parking garages, like literally the ones you go to pay when you go to a concert in the city. All those pay lot parking garages has somebody that owns them that gets paid cash flow from those. So a lot of them are like business or real estate or mineral rights or oil and gas or whatever it might be. There's all kinds of these what they call alternative investments or Main Street investing, which is completely outside of Wall Street investing, which is what every single financial person has brainwashed you to believe is the only way to make money is you just invest in Wall Street, the stock market. Well, sad thing is the stock market's high risk, mediocre returns. I can do way better in something that has a little bit less risk and I can make more money.
Let's talk about the kind of people that you work with, and I'd love to
Mhm.
know like who they are. And it sounds like some of their biggest problems is like they are exhausted doing work that they don't want to do. They're doing
Mhm.
things that they have to work harder than they actually thought they needed to or were promised. They're believing things that really even the people that are giving the advice aren't any more free than they are. And so yeah, it's high risk for poor returns. Are there any other
Yeah.
problems that are common in the people that you work with or serve and support?
Yeah, it's a lot of them are Gen Xers or like or Xennials or people like that where they tend to question like, wait a minute, is this status quo really working? Right? Because if you look at it, the average American's not doing well. I mean, they're not retiring, they're not doing all that stuff. And what you tend to see is they do get burned out to some level. Not that they don't like what they do. Sometimes they love what they do, but they just want to have a better option. I'll give you an example. I had a guy that he was like the Dave Ramsey poster child, right? If you guys don't know who Dave Ramsey is, he's the guy that always teaches people to, live on a budget. Debt is dumb, cash is king, and everybody else is stupid, like that's his big shtick. And I'm not big on the whole scarcity mentality and trying to use that to manipulate people. But again, he's good for basic people. But here's the problem: is that instead of just getting people to be like learn the 101 about money, to live on a budget and all that kind of stuff he does talk about. The problem is they keep listening to him about how to create wealth, and he doesn't do a good job of that. And so I had a guy that he reached out to me recently. He just turned 59 and a half, right? So he's saying, "Hey, I can finally get to my retirement accounts." Like, but when I talked to my Vanguard advisor, I told him, I said, "Listen, I want to live on 200,000 a year." And he wouldn't tell me what I need to do that. In fact, he didn't give me any answer. And I said, "Well, tell me about your situation." He's like, "Well, I've got, $9 million in retirement accounts." He's like, "I've also got a rental property that I make a few $100 a month off of. That's got some equity in it." But he's like, "I'm basically worth $3 million net worth, but I can't, I can't do anything. I can't stop. He won't give me the answer. Like, I feel like I have to keep working." And I told him, I said, and this is what's common. Like, it may not be this big of a number, but even if it's a smaller number, they always feel the same way. They're like, "Listen, Chris, I don't mind working until I'm 59 or 70 or whatever. I just want to be able to do it on my own terms. I want to feel like I'm in control, that I get to call the shots, that if anything happens or I can buy my time back, especially if I have kids growing up, I want to be able to be there with them." And in his case, he's like, "Yeah, like this guy wouldn't give me the answer." And I told him, I said, "Well, that's because either one, he doesn't know how to calculate it, or two, he's scared to give you the answer." Because here's the problem. I said, "You would need to live on 3% a year. $200,000, you need $6.7 million saved up. You've got about $2 million. So in the next several years, you got to somehow triple your money. Either the market goes up, which it's not expected to do anytime soon, or two, you got to keep saving. And you might have to work until your 70s. And the sad thing is, you're in the top 1% to 2% of Americans that are saving in their retirement plans right now. Like, what does that tell you?" And he's like, "Oh, man, that sucks." I was like, "It does." I was like, "Here's the thing though, shift your perspective because you're stuck in his perspective. And yeah, it's depressing, which is why I left being a financial advisor." I said, "Here's the thing. You got 1.9 million. I'm like, there's plenty of deals that I know about that will pay you in income 10% a year or more. So what's 10% of 1.9 million? It's like 190,000. I'm like, what's your goal? $200,000. I'm like, right. So even if you just did this, you take that 190, put the 1.9 million, makes 190,000, take the 190,000, invest it again, make 10%, you'll be at just over $200,000 next year. So guess what? Good news, you could retire when you're 60. Better news, you could do it when you're 59 because that property you have, how much equity is in there? It's like 800,000. And how much you make per month? $300 a month. Great. We could sell that property, get the 800,000 out. And let's just say you only get 700,000 because maybe the market, you can't get everything out of it. 700,000, you invest and make 10%. That's now 70,000 more on top of the 190. Now you're making over a quarter million a year. You could do it this year. And he's like, "Dang, that's crazy." And that's what I find is that people are just, it's not that it's not possible. They just don't know what's possible because they've been told that it's just this, right? This is my only path. I've got to save way more than I really need to just to make sure that if the stock market goes down, I don't lose everything.
Amazing. Really good stuff. And it's both exciting and sad to hear
Mhm.
this and hear yeah, where so many people feel limited. And even it's
Yeah.
exciting for me as somebody who I've been entrepreneurial for a while, but I've always been afraid of real estate, probably for that I didn't know what was possible out there and not wanting to get tied down to a certain property or
Yeah.
do that. And just again, I'm like experiencing the pain of not quite knowing what's possible. And so this is really enlightening.
I
um,
get a lot of business owners that say a lot of the same things. Because
mhm,
I would say probably more than 50% of our clients are business owners, right? They make good money in their business. From the outside on social media, their life looks awesome because they'll go on the vacations, they'll do the trips and everything. But they get still stuck in their own version of the rat race, right? They get constantly just always reinvest in their business and nothing really happens to that profit. Or if they do, it usually gets gambled away in stock market stuff or whatever, right?
mhm.
And then they're like, "Man, will this ever end?" Like, even if I love my business, where's my, do I have to like finally find a way to sell my business to finally have an exit, or are there other options? And that's why so many of them will say, wait, can I do something that won't distract me from my business, which is my number one economic engine? Like that's the thing I should be making money in, and not like have this whole, it's like people that say you create passive income, but it's this whole other side business you got to do. And then it just
Mhm.
distracts you from the business that is making money to do something you're hoping to make money. So you have multiple streams of income, but your income just dropped overall, right? And instead, it's like, no, you don't have to have this whole other side business. You literally can be investing with people that are doing the real estate deals. You're just the one financing it. You're backing it. You're that silent partner that gets paid. And then you get some, if you can, try to get some kind of guarantees or some kind of assurances to ensure that you do get that money back. And then you can kind of say, great, I'm going to go all in on my business, do what I'm doing, but now I'm creating multiple streams of income. So if I ever have another 2020 where I'm a non-essential business and that kind of crap, at least I know if I shut down my business, I'm not hosed, right? Like I still have
Mhm.
hope of doing something else. And that's why we're seeing more and more business owners doing that.
I'd love to hear about 2007 for you. Um,
Yeah.
going broke during the recession, and maybe like a very specific day where a lot of the floor fell out from underneath you. Tell me about one of those times.
Yeah, it's so beginning of 2007, I started a business with some partners, again, to save people financially, right? Teach them another way, get them out of the rat races. Robert Kiyosaki teaches in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so we started to launch that business, and the people that we were teaching mostly were real estate flippers. A lot of the same people like my friend was. And what we noticed pretty quickly was when the banks stopped lending money to people, especially in the real estate game and whatnot, the banks were very quiet about it. Like in summer 2007, I watched it personally because I remember June of 2007, I was having my basement finished with the new house I bought. I bought my own little big mansion at this point. And I bought it in 2006, and then finished off the basement with my growing family. So I knew I had my forever home. And then when I finally in July, I go to the bank saying, "Hey, listen, let's get an appraisal done." We get the appraisal done, and it's worth more than even what I put into the house. So I'm thinking I'm a genius. I've got 150,000 of equity. I tell the bank, I said, "Great, let's cash it out." And the bank said, "Oh, if you just get your credit score up 2 more points, I'm literally not lying here, 2 points, we'll give you the loan next month." I said, "Well, that's easy. I just have to make on-time payments. I'll be there." So I did. And then, of course, they said, "Oh, we just changed the rules last week. If you actually do X, Y, and Z," and I can't remember all the hoops they made me jump through. "If you keep your credit score up and you do X, Y, Z, then in September, we'll let you cash out the equity from your home." Remember, I was a mortgage broker. So I was like, this is really weird that they keep stringing me along. Fine, I'll do what you guys ask. By the way, in the meantime, while this is happening, I finally started to track my money because money can be like air, right? When it's so abundant in your life, when it's always flowing in, just like air, you never count the number of breaths until it's taken away from you. But when you don't have that air, you count every little breath. Same thing with money. What I noticed in the meantime, while I was starting to do this, was that my savings were depleting. And then I was like, oh, wow, why is my savings disappearing so quickly? So I finally decided to actually look at my money, right? Rather than just look at my account balance, look at, hey, how much am I really spending between my business, because I have all of these business expenses going on now, and my personal life? And when I looked at everything, and this was roughly about the same time I was doing this refinance, I realized I was in the hole about $16,000 a month. So roughly about 200 grand a year short of where I was. So I was making like 5 or 6,000 a month, but with my business and my personal expenses, it was like $22,000 a month. And so I thought, oh my gosh, like I better get this refinanced fast because now I need the money. So of course I'm stringing along until September, and then September comes along. I go to the banker, I said, "Listen, pull my credit, look at everything. I've done everything you asked. Let's get this deal done," because now I'm getting a little bit desperate. And the banker said at that point, "There's like, we're sorry, we no longer offer cash out refinances to business owners." And so now this equity's trapped in my property. Now I'm scrambling, wondering what to do. I started trying to find little ways to cut back on expenses, but I mean, it didn't matter if I was debt free because I wasn't that much in debt up to that point. It didn't matter because there was just way more expenses come out in the business. Sometimes I wasn't paying ourselves at home a whole lot, and we had expenses at home. And so I was sinking fast. By really early 2008, I mean, even by late 2007, I'd already turned in my Mercedes, drove it to the dealership I bought it from. I said, "Here you go. Here's the keys." I said, "What's this?" I said, "This is your car because in about a month, you're going to repossess it from me anyways. So just take it." So they took it. I was just trying to figure out where to cut back. I was scrambling. Eventually, that equity in my house disappeared. So in 2008, when I realized I can't, I better just sell this house. It was my forever home. I got to sell it. I tried to sell it, but now it's worth less because the banks tightened their credit on everybody. And properties weren't turning over and they were selling for less. And so all this equity, 150,000 equity, gone like that in just months. And so what I thought was a safe thing to do by paying extra money into your house was actually one of the worst things I could do. This is why I tell people, like, when they tell you to pay off your house early, no way, screw that. Don't do it, because that's not a safe place either. Like, it's better to have it in your own possession, especially if you're a business owner. Keep cash, you know? And so at that point, because I was upside down on my property, now I had to do what's called a short sale. Well, guess what? We get an offer. Somebody says, "Hey, we'll buy your house for 515,000." It was a little bit under what I owed. And I went to the bank, say, "Hey, will you approve this?" And the bank said no. The bank, by the way, was owned by Lehman Brothers, and Lehman Brothers just forced everybody into foreclosure. So by April 2009, just 1 week before my fourth child was born, I get a knock on the door. Guy's like, "Hey, I just bought your house a half hour ago at the county courthouse. When can you get out?" I said, "We're about to have a baby. I don't know." And so I just told him, I was like, "Listen, can I pay you $2,000 to stay here for the next 2 weeks so we can have our baby and find a place to live?" He's like, "Fine, whatever." So I did. Eventually, we had our baby right when my wife's going through postpartum. We're moving everything out, just trying to downsize a house that's like a quarter of the payment that we had with our other mortgage. And it was a rough time, that we went through, going through that. Not to mention all the collector calls. I had collector calls calling in multiple times a day that I would avoid. And I just felt like I was drowning. I stopped teaching people how to get out of the rat race by 2008, because I was in the rat race. So I started teaching people how to find money, because that's what I was doing. And fortunately for me, that pivot and creating that system of how to find and free up cash and things like that was actually the very thing that saved me. Just months after we lost our house, after we almost lost everything that we owned by selling it off, or foreclosing or whatever. At that point, that's when everything started to turn around in my life.
When you say, yeah, that's powerful. There's a lot in there, and it is tough. You really did go through the same thing of doing all of the right things and having it not reward you.
Mhm.
Tell me about another time of the opposite frequency where you really are feeling free. You really are feeling the possibility. Maybe this is your ballroom dancing championship, since you've had time to exercise other areas of your life, or spending time with your kids. What's a real highlight of freedom for you in your life?
I identify financial freedom a little bit differently than some people. I see it where money is no longer the reason or excuse that you do or do not do anything, right? Um, and that's not just something that you see on your bank account or with the amount of passive income streams you have coming in. It's actually very much an emotional and a mental game, as well as it is a financial game. Because I could be financially independent, but still be in scarcity and feel broke, right? And I have clients that have done that, where I've had to tell them, "You're missing that one component. That abundance mentality is everything." I'll tell you, the one benefit I had from 2009 to eventually led to financial freedom is when I surrendered. When I got to a place where I said, "I don't care how long it takes me to get out of this. I'm going to keep doing the right things, because I know if I just keep doing what's right, the results is going to follow." And it was interesting. That was August of 2009. In fact, I had a moment where I yelled at my wife, at that time. She was yelling at me first. She was just saying, like, "This has been 2 years. When are we going to finally get out of this mess? Like, I'm sick and tired of you saying it. We're going to get out of it. We don't get out of it." And I just told her, I was like, "Listen, I feel like I was in this place of surrender. I was like, I feel that something's going to change. And there will be a moment where I'll say, 'I told you so.' Like, it's happening." And I went outdoors, slammed the door, and I drove off to work. Literally, when I got to that point where it's like, I just know that's going to work out for me, that I know that with Napoleon Hill talks about, with every adversity comes a seed of an equal or greater opportunity. So I was like, great, if it was this sucky before, the other side's got to be better. And of course, just 2 months later, things started to turn around in our business. Like, we got the right relationships that showed up. Helped one guy find $50,000 a year he was overpaying in taxes and stuff, and that caused the guy to ball. And all of a sudden, things were great. But see, the thing is, by that point, even though financially I was still hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, even by that point, still, like, I realized that when I lost everything, that's when I knew I had everything. Because I used to have the things define me as who I was. I used to think it was the stuff, right? Show off the car, show off the house, and then people think I'm worth something. But when it was all stripped away, I had to make a critical choice. Either I'm worthless now because I don't have my stuff, or maybe there's still some infinite worth within me that actually has nothing to do with my stuff. And so I actually became liberated on a financial freedom side when I was broke, because when I finally just released myself from that attachment, when all of a sudden the money started coming in, it didn't have the same effect. One, I didn't inflate my ego as much because I just didn't care. I was like, cool, that's just money. I have a stewardship of it. My whole goal is to make better use of it. And There's people I owe money to. Let's pay them back. And so finally, I remember December 2016. I just got, I'd been through a divorce in 2015, 2016, I get remarried. And then in December, I'm looking at my numbers and I was like, wait a minute. I now have enough passive income coming in that I'm like, once again, work optional. And the next month we were already planning to go to California. Ironic because I was scared. I was like, wait, what's that look like? Like, how do you know, go just stay in an Airbnb for a couple months, right? I was like, I'm going to go to Southern California. And so we went, took her girls because she was homeschooling her girls, and we went to California for a couple months. And I was basically living a retired life. Um, and now, was that my favorite time? No. Um, but it got me closer because eventually I realized that if I work too many hours, I burn out. But if I work too few, my fire burns out and I lose that passion for life. And so I started, when I came back from that trip in California, moved back to Utah again, I realized I was like, you know what? I got to have that balance. And for me, that high moment was probably by like 2018 or so when I realized, like, wait a minute, I want to just teach. I want to help people. And that's why the name of my company is Money Ripples. It's that ripple effect that when you're blessed financially, you can bless more lives, right? You can create a ripple effect by not worrying about your own needs. You can help others too. And so I started focusing really on giving back. I still kept doing my podcast, that I've now done for over 12 years. And I want to keep teaching and doing that and not having the worries about money and trying to take care of my own needs and focus again, and even taking my money in certain 2020, taking my own money and investing in my business more so to create a bigger megaphone, so to speak. That's when things really got exciting because now I had a life of purpose. So for me, it wasn't just the financial independence or the freedom; it was the freedom plus purpose that really got me to living that best life.
Beautiful. Chris, are you ready to hear your story?
I would love to hear it.
I remember at the bottom of it all, in a shouting contest with my wife, she's yelling, "It's been 2 years. When are we going to get out of this?" And I look back at her with anger and I say, I know something's going to change. And there will be a moment. I said, I told you so. And I storm out the door at the end of the hardest 2 years of my life. It's 2009. And in the last couple of years, I started a business hoping to get teaching people how to make money. I bought a new house. I remember finishing up the basement myself. I remember getting the first appraisal on it, seeing how valuable it was and feeling like everything that I was doing was right. And slowly at that time, the banks and the system started to change the rules without me noticing it. I wanted to get a loan. They told me to come back. They told me to jump through this hoop and that hoop. And all of a sudden, they wouldn't lend me the money that I was counting on, that I had built this whole strategy on, that I had built my whole home around. And I was locked in. It didn't matter that I was debt free. It didn't matter what I had saved because I was bleeding out cash between my personal expenses and my business month over month. I remember turning in one of the symbols of the success that I had built, my Mercedes, and the people at the car lot going like, "What are you doing?" And you said, "You're going to repossess it in a month anyway. I know it." And I can remember my heart breaking as the value, the equity of this house that I had been putting so much into, that I was hoping to get a loan and get out, started to decline over and over. Debt collectors start calling off the hooks, and I can't even sell the house at a short sale to get out of this. And I can remember one day somebody coming to the door and telling me that my house was bought from underneath me and trying to negotiate a couple of weeks more stay with a few $1,000s so I could have my child in this house. And now it's all come to this moment. My wife, so frustrated, so confused, and me too, after doing everything. And I stepped out of that door, and strangely, this is in the moment that I discovered I had nothing, where I really knew what I had, where I really started to begin to feel wealthy, where I started to change my mindset and truly began to build back what I had already built before. Because once before in the laboratory of my life, I had used systems of passive income and investing to create a work optional environment for me. And though I had changed my path, I still knew the timeless principles. I knew a way to have to get to this area of passive income, of work optional, faster than most people's financial advisors would ever promise, by questioning the status quo and by changing of what I knew was possible. And I can remember recommitting to this system that I had built so many years ago that I talk about and share. And when the money started coming back in, I remember it not having the same effect on me where it once felt so exhilarating. Now I knew what true wealth was, and it wasn't just in cash, it was in a system. I can remember in 2016 looking at my numbers, and after having one of the most challenging years of my life, realizing that I have enough in passive income again to go back to work optional, to take time to rent an Airbnb in California and slow down. I remember sitting on my beach with my girls and living a retired life. And one of the strange things that happened is actually having the time and spaciousness to not do anything showed me how important it was, and showed me a desire that I wanted to work, I wanted to create, I wanted to keep that fire alive. And now I've dedicated myself to helping others who've gone through the same way, who are tired of the status quo, who've done all of the right things and the system still seems to fail, by sharing my knowledge on podcasts, on books, online, and in many different ways, in helping you discover true passive income. Not something that will distract you from your job, drain your energy and your time and your money more, but will create more freedom, and we can get you there faster than you thought possible. Well, Chris, do you have any closing thoughts for us today, and where can we go to learn more about you?
Yeah, I think I'll close with something you said as well, right? Is that in a lot of ways, even though you might be struggling in life, there's always hope. And often it just means that it has to be a shift of perspective to see something you never saw before. And that's the thing I love doing. That's what gets me up every day is helping people have that kind of hope, that knows that there could actually be freedom much, much closer than they ever thought possible. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on. You can always find me at anything with Money Ripples, whether it's moneyripples.com, at Money Ripples on social media, or the Money Ripples podcast.
Amazing. Chris Miles, thank you so much for joining us today on the Story Engine podcast.
Thanks for having me on.